Hello, art teachers. This is another demo video in my Sewing with Felt series. In this one, we're going to make a very easy fold over purse. And for this one, I'm going to demonstrate the blanket stitch, which is a little bit trickier than the whip stitch and the running stitch, which I've already demonstrated, but it's a little more decorative. Of course, in most sewing, your stitches are on the inside. They're not something for show. But when you're sewing with felt, usually your stitches are going to be on the outside. Therefore, you want to make them as nice as possible. So this is a very easy project, and it's very popular with the girls. Although if you show some more masculine examples in, say, browns or blues, sometimes a little pouch, especially if you make it a drawstring, is appealing to the guys as well. This is going to work with any size felt as long as it is rectangular. You are going to need a rectangle, and you are going to fold it part way up and then sew it over for a flap. You can see that made a long envelope shape. This one is exactly the same thing, but it's just making a cute little pouch that would be very cute on a long string. This one is just a tiny thing. You can adjust the shape to be small, large, long, tall, any way you want. I'm going to demonstrate the fold over in one color, but you could just as easily do a smooth pouch that meets at the top, and then you can put a drawstring on it. Now, of course, it's not going to work for something that's really wide, but if you had something the proper shape, a drawstring can work really well in felt. So I'm going to use this piece because I think it's the quickest one that I can do on camera easily. Forgive me, I'm so distracted by the fact that my hands look totally purple. Why do they look purple? I don't know. The lighting is always strange when I make these videos. I'm once again using this black pearl cotton string. This is not a combo that I would usually use, but I want it to show up on camera. Also, make my knot at the end. My stitches here are going to be much bigger than I would normally make them. Again, I'm doing it for you, the home viewer. So I'm going to figure out just how deep I want that flap. You know, you could do it so that the whole thing flaps over like that, or you could do it, you know, with just a teeny tiny flap. But I want to put a button on there. Buttons are very easy to sew with felt, so I'm going to make it, I think, about like that. I will put a couple pins in each side. Beginning students will have trouble pinning, so you can help them out with that. Now, where to stitch? You are definitely going to need to stitch these two together because that's what's going to hold it together. You might also want to do a decorative stitch across here or a decorative stitch across there. So I folded that up and trimmed it a little because it didn't look quite straight. The blanket stitch, like all the stitches, we're going to want to start on the inside so we can hide that knot. And our first stitch is going to be just a basic whip stitch. But instead of moving up, we're going to come up in the same spot. And instead of pulling tight, I'm going to put my thread through this hole. And now my thread is on the outside. I got to figure out how I can hold this and demonstrate at the same time. Okay, so yeah, these are going to be a little bit bigger than I would normally I would make them small like this, but I want you to be able to see them, so I'm going to make them a little bit bigger. I'm going to go in from the top, and when I come out, I'm going to come out on top of that black thread. I'm going to come in the top again. Again, I'm going to lift that up and put that black thread underneath. I make them as even as I can. So as I've said in the other videos, I might use a thread that it was either a prettier color combination or something that was going to be more invisible. But if you're doing the blanket stitch, you're probably going to want to do something that is contrasting. As you can see, I'm sewing these two pieces together. It's always a trick to see if I can get it so you can see it. Maybe this will be better. Watching the monitor and my stitching at the same time. But the blanket stitch is a lovely stitch even to do on a single layer. So even though I'm not actually sewing two things together here, I'm going to do that blanket stitch all the way up and around. And it's kind of weird the way I'm changing hands there. I normally would not be changing hands, but I'm just doing it so you can see it in the camera better. And it might be for your beginning stitchers, you know, maybe easier to lay it flat so they can, oh, I'm going to stop there. I forgot. I wanted to curve my edges a little bit. Makes it easier to go around. So anyway, I was saying for your beginning stitchers, it might be easier for them to lay this flat while they're doing it. I am about to run out of thread, which is not really a problem on a seam because you can hide it. It's not so great up here on this unfinished edge. So I really should have gotten more thread on my needle before I started that because that's going to be right up there at the top. But we'll see. We can solve any problem. Just tied a little knot there. I'm going to tuck it in there a little bit. Again, not ideal, especially for a demo video. But actually, it's going to give me the opportunity to show you the other thing I wanted to show you, which is that you can do the stitch sort of backwards as well. Okay, so this time I'm going to start down at this other end. I could pick up right here, but because I'm sort of going to change my stitch a little, I'm going to go down here, start at the other end. Again, I'm going to get just a basic loop on here. And this is going to be a variation of the same thing, but instead of having that line out here on the outside edge, I'm going to put that wrapped line on the inside. Sorry, I know it's confusing when I turn it around, but I'm always trying to get the best angle that I can actually do the stitching and show you at the same time. Now, you can see these little pinholes here because I've actually done this twice now and pulled it out because it wasn't going the way I wanted to. This is the great advantage of stitching, is that it's so easy, especially stitching on felt, that is so easy to fix your mistakes that way. I'm going to try this one more time. Gone through so many times, now I'm getting knots. Sometimes if your thread starts getting knotted up, it starts to get sort of rough and sticky, and sometimes you just want to start with a new piece of thread. I am soldiering through with this one. So I'm going around the bottom. It's pretty much the same stitch that I was doing before, but instead of putting that line on the outside, I'm putting it on the inside. Now I have to move my thumb so you can see what I'm doing, but actually having my thumb there really helps put it in the right position. You can see this is why it's a little more difficult than the whip stitch or the running stitch. Not because the actual stitch is that much more difficult, but to make it decorative, to make it even, you have to spend just a little more time fiddling. And also, when I'm not doing this for camera, I'm doing it much closer to my body, sort of holding it in my lap. I'm going much faster and smaller, and so it's actually a lot more easy than I'm making it look. All the way up here. And now, because I want it to match over here, I'm actually going to make a switch. But when I go around the top, it's going to match. I'm going back around the outside again. That match here. And remember, I've got that stupid little knot because I didn't measure correctly. When in doubt, if you have something you need to cover up, just put a little flour on top of it. In the ideal world, you would not have an ugly knot right there. You would have buried all of your finishes down here in the seams. You can see you've got a nice little pouch there. You could put a little decorative stitching there if you wanted. I'm going to put a little button on there. So when you put your button on, you want to make sure that your flap is going to cover it. And as I showed before, you make really big flaps if you want, or really small ones. With the knot in the back. Say that's roughly centered. Everything about this is roughly. Despite my many decades as a needleworker, as a needlework teacher, consider this a sample of what it will look like when your first time elementary or middle school stitchers try it for the first time. It's okay to be ugly. That is how we are learning how to do the construction. So now I can feel where this button is. I'm just going to pinch that right there. And the great thing about felt is, unlike regular fabric, which you would have to finish that buttonhole, felt, because it doesn't fray, you can cut anything into it you want. Now, another thing you might want to do is put a long handle on it. For that, you could sew something to the outside. One thing you want to be careful about is you don't want to sew something just to this flap here. And also, if you have something that is very long, like this one, it's difficult to put a strap on it because then it will tend to bend. So you definitely want it to be more smaller or longer if you're going to put a strap on it. But I've had many students who will finish this off with a long strap. One thing I like to do, because they usually put the strap on after they've finished all the stitching, and we don't want to ruin that stitching, I have them sew it on to the inside. And also, you want to, don't sew it right up here because it'll pull. Make sure they put it in nice and deep. They can take the weight of that. That is a nice little fold over pouch. But as long as I've got you here, I'm going to do another one real quick so you can see the alternative with a drawstring. I think I'll use the green one for this. And I'm just going to do this real quick. I think I will, just in case you have not watched the other videos with your other stitches, I'll give you a real quickie on the other stitches. I'm always putting my knot down here in the bottom. There. I'm going to go up this side. With the whip stitch. When you get to the top, I don't think I showed any real tacking in the other one. Tacking is when you go 3 or more times around in the same spot to make your knot. And I'm going to hide that down in there. That side was whip stitch. All right, I'm going to start from the other side. I'm going to put my knot down in there. Side is going to be running stitch. A great size to make these to interest to the young men in your class is just the right size to hold a pack of Pokemon cards. Again, I have to issue the disclaimer that I'm doing this with giant stitches, much faster and messier than I would normally do this for my own work, which I think I'm going to make a video showing you some of actually my own work, some things that I'm making for sale in some of the galleries that carry my work. So you can get an idea of what it might look like beyond the 5th grade. You will often get, when you get a knot like that, the student will stop right away and they're like, oh, Miss Weiler, I got a knot. But, you know, encourage them to work it out a little bit. Encourage them to see if they can't figure out how to get it out. Of course, you don't want them to ruin anything or make more of a mess, but figuring out how to undo knots is part of the process. You can see I did not measure when I made this. When my students are doing it, I insist they make patterns. Okay, I'm going to use different threads for this because I want you to be able to see what I am doing here. I'm going to get 2 long threads. And I'm using this pearl cotton that I'm sewing with because it happens to be right here, but you could just as easily use a thicker cord here. And if you wanted to use a thicker cord that you're not putting in with a needle like I'm going to, you could just make little snips, little holes along here for the threading. That would take a thicker cord. Now, something so small as this, you don't really need a thicker cord, but perhaps if you had a larger pouch. So for this, I'm not going to go through both of them. I'm going to go through one at a time. And I'm not pulling that all the way through. I'm leaving that out. So you can see I've got this string is doubled up here. A pink and a purple. Go through there. Come back on the other side. And although I will tell you all the time to pull your stitches all the way through, you're not actually going to pull this all the way through. You're going to leave a little bit of that hanging out on the other side. Okay. So now we've got some hanging out here, and we've got some hanging out here. Tie those two together. Now, you could use this together and pull this tight as a pouch just with one string. But the reason I use 2, of course, now I've pulled that through in a way I don't want, is I'm going to take the pink one on this side. Oh, Forgive me, I totally did that wrong. I tied them all together. You don't want to do that. You want to tie the purple ones together and tie the pink ones together. All right, in which case, you're going to pull pink here, purple here, and then you've got a nice little drawstring bag. And, you can make these, like I said, any length, any weight. But if you made that the size of whatever fidgets they're carrying or Pokemon deck, that might be appealing, perhaps not in these colors, to your young men. So that very quickly is the most popular sorts of things we do for my 5th grade sewing projects. That is the single piece of fabric folded bag. This can be folded, or you could do 2 different pieces and sew it all around if you wanted it 2 colors. Any sort of 2-sided shape. Hearts, like I said, are very popular, but I have a lot of stencils in my room, so they sometimes cut out other shapes as well. And for the really ambitious, we have the 6-sided cube. Another very popular item is a stuffed animal, either 2-sided like this or with a 2-sided with a flat bottom on it. If I have time, I'll make a demo of that as well, but I'm trying to get this all done before I present at the Florida Art Educators Association. Hi, everybody. Coming up in just a few weeks. All of this was pretty fast and sloppy, as you can tell. I'm very self-conscious about, because it is aimed at elementary school and first-time stitchers. If you are interested, I can make more demo videos of all sorts of lovely things that are more appropriate for middle school, high school, and for your own work that has finer skills and much nicer materials and stitching, but I don't want to do that if there's no demand for it. So if I do see you at FAEA 2025, I hope this will illustrate what I was talking about a little bit better. And if you didn't see me at FAEA 25, then I hope it was useful to you too. As always, I will remind you that I am posting my entire elementary art curriculum online, as well as some other things for the higher grades and for adults. So like and subscribe if you want to know everything that I know.